Listen, time doesn't knock anymore. It slips through your hands while you scroll, while you wait for motivation, while you tell yourself, I'll start tomorrow, and tomorrow keeps getting promoted to a future that never shows up. 2026 is not asking for your excuses. It's asking for your attention. Because time is the only thing that leaves without saying goodbye. Money can return. People can change. Confidence can be rebuilt. But a year disappears silently, and one day you realize you've been busy, but not alive. I know what it feels like to be tired without effort, to be exhausted from doing nothing that matters, to confuse comfort with peace, distraction with happiness, movement with progress. You don't waste time because you're lazy. You waste time because you're scared. Scared of failing, scared of starting over, scared of finding out what you're actually capable of when there are no excuses left to hide behind. So you numb yourself. You stay entertained. You stay available to everyone except your own future. But hear this, your life is not a rehearsal. Every day you postpone your growth. You teach your mind that procrastination is acceptable. Every promise you break to yourself teaches your soul that your word means nothing. And that's how self-respect erodes, quietly, daily, legally. Discipline isn't about punishment. It's about dignity. It's waking up and saying, I deserve a life I don't need to escape from. You don't need a new year. You need a new standard. Stop negotiating with the version of you that's comfortable staying small. Stop romanticizing potential while avoiding the work required to meet it. Growth is uncomfortable. Loneliness will visit. Doubt will speak loudly, but regret screams forever. One day, your younger self will ask, did you protect my dreams? And your older self will ask, did you respect my time? 2026 is watching, not judging, waiting to see if this is the year you stop surviving and start choosing yourself with intention, with discipline, with self-respect. Because wasted time isn't lost hours. It's lost courage, lost truth, lost versions of you that never got a chance to exist. Don't let another year disappear quietly. Stand up, pay attention, and live like your future is listening, because it is. You think you're wasting time because you're lazy, because you lack discipline, because you don't have enough motivation, but that's not the truth. And deep down, you know it. If it were laziness, you wouldn't be so tired. If it were lack of ambition, you wouldn't feel that quiet ache in your chest when you're alone. You don't avoid the work because you don't care. You avoid it because you care too much about what might happen if you actually try. Fear doesn't always look like panic. Sometimes it looks like scrolling until your eyes burn. Sometimes it looks like overthinking every move until no move gets made. Sometimes it looks like staying busy with things that don't require courage. Fear is subtle. It whispers, wait until you're ready, knowing full well that ready is a lie we tell ourselves to feel safe. You see, effort exposes us. Trying means you could fail in public. Starting means you might discover you're not as good as you hoped, or worse, that you are, and now you can't hide anymore. So instead, you hover on the edge of your potential, close enough to feel it, far enough to deny responsibility. Time gets wasted in the spaces between intention and action. In the pause where you talk yourself out of discomfort. In the moments where you choose certainty over growth, familiarity over truth. We fear the mirror that effort holds up to us. Because effort doesn't lie. It shows us who we are when excuses are stripped away. It shows us whether the story we tell about ourselves can survive contact with reality. So we delay, we distract, we numb. Not because we don't want more, but because more would demand a different version of us. There's a strange comfort in staying untested. As long as you haven't tried, your dreams stay perfect, untouched, unbroken, but also unreal. Fear keeps you parked in almost started, almost changed, almost brave. And the scariest part, fear will let you stay there forever if you let it. It doesn't rush you. It doesn't shout. It waits patiently while your life slowly trades urgency for habit. But here's the truth no one says out loud. Wasting time is less painful than confronting your limits until one day it isn't. Until the cost of avoidance outweighs the cost of trying. Until regret becomes heavier than fear. At some point, you realize time wasn't slipping away by accident. It was being offered day after day and quietly declined. And maybe the real question isn't why you're afraid to fail, but why you've been afraid to find out who you become when you stop running from yourself. Every time you say, I'll do it tomorrow, and tomorrow comes and goes, something inside you takes notes. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. Like a witness sitting in the back of your mind, writing down every promise you make and every promise you break. At first, it doesn't feel serious. You tell yourself it's just one missed morning, one skipped workout, one unfinished goal, one delay that doesn't really matter. But your mind doesn't measure promises by size. It measures them by consistency. And consistency is how trust is built or lost. Think about the people you trust least in your life. They're not always the ones who lied once. They're the ones who said they'd show up and didn't, over and over. Eventually, you stop believing their words not because you wanted to, but because experience taught you to. Now imagine what happens when that person is you. Every broken promise is a quiet vote against your own credibility. You stop taking yourself seriously. Your goals start to feel fictional. Your inner voice loses authority. You begin to negotiate with yourself like you're someone you don't respect. You lower the standard. You make excuses before you even try. You stop expecting follow through, so you stop giving it. And this is how self-respect erodes. Not through one big failure, but through thousands of small betrayals that go unnoticed until the damage is done. Self-respect isn't confidence. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It's built in the private moments when no one is watching, and you still do what you said you would do. Or don't. You can feel it when it's slipping. It shows up as hesitation when you set goals, as guilt that lingers longer than it should, as a quiet sense that you're capable of more, but somehow disconnected from it. And the pain isn't dramatic, it's dull. A low hum of disappointment you carry everywhere. A feeling that you're living slightly below your own standards, even if no one else can see it. The dangerous part is how normal it becomes. You start to accept inconsistency as your personality. You tell yourself, that's just how I am, without realizing you're rehearsing a version of yourself you never consciously chose. But here's what most people never realize. Self-respect isn't restored by big moments. It doesn't come from motivation or speeches or sudden inspiration. It comes back the same way it was lost quietly. When you keep a small promise, even when it's inconvenient. When you follow through without applause. When you do the thing you said you would do, not because you feel like it, but because you said you would. That's when something shifts. Not overnight, but internally. You start trusting yourself again. Your words carry weight. Your decisions feel grounded. You don't need to hype yourself up. You believe yourself. And belief in yourself is powerful not because it feels good, but because it's earned. You don't build a life on grand intentions. You build it on the integrity of your smallest actions. So the next time you make a promise to yourself, understand this. You're not just planning a task. You're shaping a relationship. And the way you treat your word today is teaching your soul whether or not you are someone worth listening to. Somewhere along the way, discipline got a bad reputation. It was framed as punishment, as restriction, as something cold and rigid meant to squeeze the joy out of life. So you learn to avoid it. Thinking freedom lived in doing whatever you felt like, whenever you felt like it. But look closer at the moments you felt most proud of yourself. They weren't born from indulgence. They came from showing up when it would have been easier to disappear. Discipline isn't a cage. It's a mirror. It reflects how much you value yourself when comfort is available and still not chosen. When you wake up early to work on something that matters, you're not depriving yourself of sleep. You're telling your future, you matter enough for me to prepare. When you say no to a distraction, you're not being strict. You're protecting your attention like it's sacred, because it is. There's dignity and structure in deciding ahead of time who you're going to be when emotions try to negotiate your standards down. Without discipline, your life becomes a constant referendum on your mood, and moods were never designed to run anything important. We don't rise to the level of our desires. We fall to the level of what we've trained ourselves to do consistently. Discipline is self-respect in action. It's how you honor the part of you that dreams beyond today without waiting for motivation to feel generous. It's choosing alignment over impulse, purpose over comfort. And yes, discipline is uncomfortable, but so is staying stuck. The difference is one kind of discomfort builds you, while the other slowly dissolves you. You've felt the erosion before. Those days where nothing went wrong, but nothing felt right either. Where you avoided effort and somehow ended up more tired than if you had tried. That's the cost of unguarded time. Energy leaks everywhere. Discipline gathers your life back into your hands, not by force, but by clarity. It tells you what matters before the world starts shouting. It creates space where chaos used to live. It replaces guesswork with intention. And the surprising thing, discipline doesn't steal joy, it multiplies it. Because joy feels different when it's earned, when it rests on a foundation you built yourself. Think of discipline like brushing your teeth for the future version of you. You don't do it because it's exciting. You do it because neglect has consequences and care is an act of respect. The strongest people aren't the most intense. They're the most consistent. They don't rely on willpower. They design their lives to support the version of themselves they want to become. And every disciplined choice whispers the same message. I'm worth the effort, even when no one is watching. Over time, that whisper becomes a voice that doesn't need validation, a voice that stands steady when excuses arrive dressed as logic. Discipline isn't about control, it's about care. And the way you practice it today is shaping how much dignity you'll feel when you look back and ask whether you honored the life you were given. You wake up tired, even though you didn't really do anything. Your calendar is full, your phone never stops buzzing, your days blur together, yet at night, something feels unfinished. That's because movement without meaning drains you faster than stillness ever could. We were taught that being busy is a badge of honor. That exhaustion equals importance. That if you're always rushing, always responding, always occupied, then you must be doing something right. But being busy can be the most efficient way to avoid your own life. Busyness feels productive because it keeps your hands moving. But life isn't asking for motion, it's asking for direction. You can run all day on a treadmill and still go nowhere. Sweat doesn't guarantee progress. Noise doesn't guarantee purpose. And activity doesn't guarantee fulfillment. Most people aren't lazy, they're scattered, pulled in 10 directions by expectations, notifications, comparisons, and obligations they never consciously chose. So they move constantly, hoping that speed will compensate for lack of clarity. But clarity never comes from speed. It comes from stillness. You don't feel alive when you're checking boxes. You feel alive when what you're doing is aligned with who you are becoming. That's the difference between living and existing. Existing is responding. Living is choosing. When your days are filled with tasks that don't connect to your values, your spirit starts to feel unemployed. You go through motions without meaning. You accomplish things without fulfillment. And slowly, you start to wonder why you're so tired when nothing feels earned. Business numbs the deeper questions. It keeps you from asking, is this the life I want? Because asking that question requires courage and time. So instead, you stay occupied, you stay useful, you stay reachable. But being available to everything makes you unavailable to yourself. There's a quiet grief that comes from realizing you've spent years being efficient at things that don't matter to you. Not wrong, not immoral, just misaligned. You followed routines that looked responsible from the outside, but felt hollow on the inside. And no one warned you that you could do everything right and still feel lost. Being alive isn't about doing more. It's about doing what costs you energy, but gives you meaning in return. Alive feels present. It feels intentional. It feels like your actions make sense to your soul, even if they don't impress anyone else. You don't need more hours in the day. You need fewer obligations that don't deserve your hours. And that requires honesty, the kind that admits some of your business is avoidance. That some of your productivity is performance. That some of your exhaustion is self-inflicted. When you slow down enough to choose, life sharpens, your energy stops leaking, your attention returns home. You stop confusing motion with purpose. And in that quiet, uncomfortable space, you finally hear what you've been running past. The truth that you were never meant to be busy just to feel alive, but to be alive enough to choose what's worth your time. Comfort rarely announces itself as danger. It doesn't arrive with alarms or warnings. It arrives softly dressed as relief, as rest, as you've done enough for today. And maybe at first you had. Comfort is seductive because it feels earned. After the struggle, after the stress, after the long days of trying to survive, it offers you a place to sit down and breathe. But the problem isn't resting. The problem is when you forget to stand back up. Comfort doesn't lock you in. It convinces you not to leave. It slowly rearranges your expectations. What once felt temporary starts to feel permanent. What once felt unacceptable starts to feel normal. You tell yourself this is just a season, but seasons pass and you're still here, rearranging the same furniture of your life, calling it stability. There's a quiet moment when you realize you've stopped asking for more, not because you don't want it, but because wanting feels exhausting. So you lower the volume on your dreams. You tell yourself you're being realistic. You confuse peace with passivity. Comfort whispers, why risk what you have? And it sounds reasonable, because comfort is never unreasonable. It's just incomplete. It protects you from discomfort, but it also protects you from growth. It shields you from failure, but it also blocks discovery. And the trade-off happens so slowly, you don't notice until years later, when potential feels like a stranger you once knew. You didn't choose to shrink. You just stopped stretching. You stayed where you were appreciated enough, paid enough, safe enough, enough to survive, not enough to evolve. And the hardest part, from the outside, your life might look fine, stable, responsible, but inside, there's a restlessness that won't let you fully rest. Because comfort that costs you your growth eventually costs you your peace. You start feeling bored with your own routines, irritated by your own predictability. There's no challenge to sharpen you, no friction to remind you that you're alive. Growth requires tension, like muscles that only strengthen when they're pushed past what's easy. Without resistance, everything softens, including your sense of self. Comfort doesn't steal your future in one dramatic moment. It takes it in small, polite installments. A year here, a risk avoided there, a dream postponed until it quietly expires. And one day, you wake up not unhappy, but unsatisfied, not broken, but unfulfilled, wondering how you became so good at maintaining a life that doesn't inspire you. The cage was never locked. The door was just padded. And the real question isn't whether comfort is wrong, but whether the version of you that stays comfortable is the one you'd be proud to become. You keep telling yourself you'll change when the time is right. When life slows down, when things make more sense, when motivation finally arrives like a lightning strike and everything becomes clear. But time doesn't work like that. It doesn't wait for you to feel ready. It responds to what you tolerate. Your future isn't built by your intentions. It's built by your standards, by what you allow to repeat, by what you excuse, by what you stop questioning. Every day, life asks you a simple question. Is this acceptable to you? And every time you say yes through an action, that answer becomes a brick in the road you're walking. You don't drift into a better life. You drift into the life you're willing to live with. Standards are quiet decisions made long before results appear. They're the invisible lines you draw when no one is watching. The moment you decide what behavior you will no longer negotiate with, especially from yourself. Most people wait for clarity before raising their standards, but clarity follows action, not the other way around. You don't need to know exactly where you're going to know that where you are is no longer enough. Raising your standards doesn't mean becoming harsh or perfect. It means becoming honest. Honest about what drains you. Honest about what you keep allowing because change feels inconvenient. Honest about the gap between the life you imagine and the life your habits are actually building. That gap doesn't close on its own. It widens quietly while you're waiting for a sign. And the sign never comes because you are the signal. When you raise your standards, life pushes back. Old patterns resist. Comfort protests. People who benefited from your low expectations may not recognize the new boundaries you set. But standards aren't about control. They're about alignment. Alignment between who you say you are and how you live when it would be easier not to care. The future version of you is being shaped right now, not by your goals, but by your tolerance for what doesn't serve you. Every excuse you accept is a vote for the life you say you don't want. Every boundary you enforce is a step toward the one you do. And this isn't about drastic change. It's about decisive change. A small, firm decision repeated daily outweighs the loudest promise made once. Your standards determine how you spend your energy, who you become around, what you keep chasing, and what you finally let go of. They decide whether your future feels intentional or accidental. You don't rise because you want more. You rise when you refuse to accept less than what you know you're capable of sustaining with integrity. So ask yourself, not someday, not next year, but now, what have you been tolerating that your future will have to live with? Because the life waiting for you isn't asking for your hope or your motivation. It's asking for your decision today. So step back, not in defeat, but in devotion to yourself. Let the noise argue without you. Let opinions pass like weather. You were never meant to carry everyone else's expectations on your back while your own dreams starved quietly behind you. This is your season to listen inward, to choose depth over distraction, to build in silence what will one day speak for itself. You don't need to announce your growth. You don't need permission to become whole. Everything you're looking for begins the moment you decide to stop abandoning yourself. Stand still long enough to remember who you are. Move forward brave enough to honor it. And when the world asks where you've been, just smile.